Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett. Amna Nawaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight, the Middle East on edge. Israel and its allies ready their defenses, anticipating retaliation for strikes against Hezbollah and Hamas leaders. The Trump campaign is hacked in what appears to be the latest foreign interference in a U.S. presidential election. And is there a future for Social Security, the benefits gap that could leave millions of Americans with a hole in their retirement safety net?
We are so bad at fixing this problem. This problem has been so evident since 1990.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Chlorfine, and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation.
Two retiring executives turn their focus to greyhounds, giving these former race dogs a real chance to win. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your purpose, and the way you give back. Life well planned.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for more than 50 years advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world, at hewlett.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The White House said today that the U.S. and Israel believe Iran and its proxies across the region could launch a significant attack in the coming days. Israel says it's on peak readiness, and the U.S. accelerated the deployment of forces to the region to try and deter Iran and defend Israel. That's despite ongoing diplomatic efforts to prevent an attack. Our story tonight starts in the Israeli city of Haifa. And a warning, some scenes of war in this story are graphic.
In 10 months of war, Israel's third largest city and its largest port have emerged untouched. But today, Haifa and Israel are worried an attack could come at any point.
And since the 7th of October, we are working from here.
Which is why Haifa's emergency preparedness chief, Leo Resnick, works from a bomb shelter. They've been on high alert for the past 10 days. After Israel assassinated a senior Hezbollah commander in Beirut, and Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed in an explosion after this event in Tehran.
We are waiting for something to happen. We are waiting for Iranian or Hezbollah to shoot.
In June, Hezbollah made its threat to Haifa's port explicit, posting drone video above an Israeli naval base. Thanks to Iranian support, Hezbollah has more than 150,000 rockets and missiles that can reach 95% of Israel. Israel is not ready for a possible onslaught.
The biggest challenge today, I think, that we don't have enough bomb shelter to all the citizens.
Which is why the Rambam Hospital is taking no chances. It has moved 2,000 beds 3 stories below street level to its underground garage. Aviv Weissman is the hospital's deputy director.
So look up, oxygen line, warm water, cold water, suction, everything that doesn't exist in a regular garage. This is a hospital floor.
It has a fully functional emergency room with an operating theater to deal with the kinds of injuries they fear are coming.
We mainly prepare for conventional war. So missiles hit, shrapnels, direct hit, regular trauma, war trauma.
The hospital's equipped to last 1 week without resupply and plans to host families if necessary.
If we come down here and it's like terrible outside, it's bombing and bombing, we could close doors and not need to open them at all for 72 hours. We have enough water, food, oxygen, energy.
To help defend Israel and try to deter Iran, this weekend Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made a rare announcement that he had deployed a guided missile submarine, the USS Georgia, to the Middle East, and accelerated the deployment of the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby spoke to reporters today.
We have to be prepared for what could be a significant set of attacks, which is why we have increased our force posture and capabilities in the region, even in just the last few days.
The Biden administration believes the best way to calm regional tension is a Gaza ceasefire that would release Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners. The U.S., alongside mediators Qatar and Egypt, have called for formal ceasefire talks to resume on Thursday, but it's not clear whether Hamas will show up. But until there's a ceasefire in Gaza, the Israeli military continues a new campaign against Hamas in the south. And too late for the woman who had hoped to shield a child. Fatia Hassan's heartbreak turned to rage. Among those killed today, her nephew.
My nephew's brain was hanging out of his head. Where is the humanity? We are dying. We're dying. We are dying every minute, every second. Where is the humanity?
A wave of humanity today evacuated yet again. Tens of thousands in Khan Yunis and an area designated by Israel as a humanitarian zone urged to flee by Israeli leaflets, the fourth evacuation order issued this month. Israel accused Hamas of hiding within the population to fire rockets. Israel also says the school turned shelter struck this weekend killed more than 30 terrorists. Palestinians say nearly 100 died as they prayed. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
We start the day's other headlines in Russia. Ukraine's top military commander says his forces now control nearly 400 square miles of Russian territory in the region of Kursk, across from Ukraine's northeastern border. It's the first time a Ukrainian military official has commented on the gains of last week's surprise incursion. For their part, Russian authorities say more than 121,000 people have evacuated the area so far, and that 12 civilians have been killed in the fighting. Today, Russian President Vladimir Putin told a meeting of top officials that the attack is an attempt to give Ukraine a better negotiating position for future peace talks.
It is becoming obvious and clear now why the Kyiv regime had refused our proposals to return to a peaceful settlement plan, as well as the proposals of interested and neutral mediators. It appears that the West is fighting us with the hands of the Ukrainians.
Ukraine's operation is the largest attack on Russian soil since the war started 2.5 years ago. In Greece, a wildfire is raging on the outskirts of Athens, forcing hundreds of people from the city's northern suburbs. At last check, the blaze was about 9 miles from the city center. It started on Sunday afternoon, sending flames as high as 80 feet into the air. Some 700 firefighters worked today to extinguish the flames as residents fled through thick clouds of smoke. Some, however, stayed behind to protect their homes.
The wind would go in one direction, then in the other. The smoke was suffocating. I couldn't see. My eyes teared up. I couldn't breathe. I was 60 yards from the house and couldn't even see it.
The fires have been fanned by intense winds and bone-dry conditions after recent heat waves. June and July were the hottest months ever recorded in that country. An earthquake rattled Los Angeles around midday today. The 4.4 magnitude quake was centered near the Highland Park neighborhood in the northeast section of the city. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, it could be felt as far south as San Diego and as far east as the Palm Springs desert region. There were no initial reports of injuries or damage. It comes less than a week after a 5.2 magnitude quake hit the area. The Biden administration has rolled out a broad new effort to improve customer service experiences by cutting down on wait times and red tape. The initiative spans a range of federal agencies and would include requiring companies to make it just as easy to cancel a subscription or membership as it was to sign up. It would also crack down on so-called doom loops and instead connect people with a live representative with the touch of a button. and it would urge healthcare companies to allow consumers to file their claims online. At today's White House press briefing, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said companies have prioritized profits over people.
Americans are tired of being played for suckers, and President Biden and Vice President Harris will continue to use every tool available to protect Americans from corporate greed and practices that hit people in their pocketbooks.
The proposals build on earlier Biden administration efforts, such as requiring airlines to automatically issue cash refunds and to reduce hidden fees to consumers. An administration official says that none of them would require congressional approval. Mars may be hiding an ocean of liquid water deep below its surface. That's according to a groundbreaking new study from the University of California that used data from NASA's now-defunct InSight lander. It suggests the water is stored in rocks 7 to 12 miles underground and could be enough to cover the planet in an ocean about a mile deep. Researchers believe the water likely seeped down billions of years ago when Mars had rivers and lakes. They say it would take drills and other equipment to confirm their theory. They could then seek out signs of microbial life. And on Wall Street today, stocks ended little changed ahead of a highly anticipated report on inflation due Wednesday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 140 points after a wild run last week. The Nasdaq eked out a gain, adding 35 points. The S&P 500 ended unchanged on the day. And the work of a famed, secretive street artist named Banksy has been popping up all over London. 8 new paintings have appeared in just the past week or so, all of them depictions of animals. The latest work by the mysterious graffiti artist shows a rhinoceros climbing on top of a real-life broken-down car. Just yesterday, onlookers gathered around a police call box that Banksy turned into a fish tank for piranhas. Other works have included a stretching cat on the side of a building and a mountain goat perched precariously on a ledge, among others. All right, still to come on the News Hour, Tamara Keith and Amy Walters break down the latest from the heated presidential race. An on-the-ground look at how one battleground state is testing voting machines to ensure accuracy. And a special exhibit explores a 19th century art form that is now banned.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump spent their weekends on the road, making their appeals to voters. They each held rallies as concerns flooded the internet, from cybersecurity threats to false allegations involving artificial intelligence. Laura Barón-Lopez has more.
It was a weekend marathon of rallies. Both candidates on the campaign trail. But for the third presidential election in a row, foreign interference has again cast an ominous shadow. On Saturday, former President Trump claimed his campaign had been hacked and suggested Iran was to blame. It stems from a Microsoft report one day earlier detailing a spear phishing incident from June, where Iranian military intelligence sent fake emails to a high-ranking official of a presidential campaign from a compromised email account of a former senior advisor. It's unclear what the breach achieved, but several media organizations say they have received anonymous emails with documents from the VP vetting process. The FBI is now investigating the hack. But the incident didn't distract the former president from peddling lies about his opponent. Trump reposted an image of a Harris rally in Detroit last week, falsely claiming she used artificial intelligence to fabricate the crowd size. Photos and videos from the event showing thousands of supporters gathered at an airplane hangar easily disprove the conspiracy theory. In response, the Harris campaign posted, "This is an actual photo of a 15,000-person crowd for Harris Walls in Michigan." Meanwhile, at a rally in Las Vegas, Harris made a new pitch to service workers, a key constituency in Nevada.
When I am president, we will continue our fight for working families of America. Including to raise the minimum wage and eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
It echoes a similar stance taken by her rival, a rare instance of political overlap. But one quickly rebutted by Trump, who accused Harris of, quote, copying him, and said the difference is she won't do it. Another target of Republican criticism, Harris's VP pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and his military record. Namely, a resurfaced clip from 2018, where Walz implied he had been deployed to a combat zone.
Those weapons of war that I carried in war.
The campaign said he misspoke, but Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton demanded more.
I respect the service of all veterans, to include Tim Walz, who served for more than 20 years. But now even the campaign has acknowledged he's made past inconsistent statements about his service. I think he should answer questions about those statements.
As for Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance made the rounds on Sunday shows. Vance tried to walk back Trump's apparent willingness to ban abortion medication and said mass deportations should start with 1 million people.
President Trump is absolutely right. You cannot have a border unless you're willing to deport some people. I think it's interesting that people focus on, well, how do you deport 18 million people? Let's start with 1 million.
But Vance argued ultimately it's Trump, not him, who voters care about.
Most people, 99% of the country, they don't vote on who the vice presidential nominee. They're voting for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris, not for J.D. or Tim Walz.
Today, President Biden returned to the White House after spending the weekend in Delaware and expressing his support for the Harris ticket on CBS Sunday Morning, his first sit-down interview since dropping out of the race last month.
Although it's a great honor being president, I think I have an obligation to the country to do the most important thing to do, and that is we must defeat Trump.
Capping off a busy weekend with more campaigning ahead. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Laura Barone-Lopez.
We're going to shift our focus now back to the new reports that U.S. elections continue to be targeted by foreign actors, with Microsoft outlining what it says was an Iranian cyber attack on an active presidential campaign. The company declined to specify which campaign was affected, but on Saturday, former President Donald Trump said on Truth Social that it was his, posting that one of his campaign's websites was hacked by the Iranian government. It comes after the Office of the Director of National Intelligence warned in late July that it continues to observe foreign influence operations by Russia, China, and Iran aimed at disrupting November's election and undermining American democracy. To help put these new reports in context, we're joined now by Chris Krebs. He's the Chief Intelligence and Public Policy Officer at SentinelOne and the former Director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So what stands out to you about this apparent cyber attack on the Trump campaign? What would Iran stand to gain by hacking the campaign and distributing potentially sensitive information?
Well, I think it's important to note that the hack piece and the leak piece are separate. We may not have certainty of whether they're actually related, whether this Robert individual that anonymously emailed Politico, Washington Post, others, is sharing information that was stolen from the Trump campaign. That's, I think, just something that we need to kind of set out. But I think what's most significant, what's most remarkable about this activity is that it, to me, signifies what I've been calling the Russification of Iranian information operations. And what that means is when you look at the 2016 election, as laid out in the intelligence community assessment of 2017, it characterized the Russian efforts to interfere in that election along three prongs. First is going after election infrastructure. The second is hacking campaigns and leaking information. The third is this broader disinformation operation. And if you go and look at that Microsoft report from this past Friday, it talks about Iranians trying to continue to stoke discord and discontent across the nation, about hacking a county election official, and yes, hacking a campaign. So what we're seeing again is kind of echoes of the past, but from a different country. And what do they gain? Chaos. That's the immediate point, is getting in there and undermining the electoral process and also targeting specifically someone that they don't have a lot of affection for, and that's former President Trump.
When it comes to foreign influence campaigns by countries like Russia, China, Iran, do they have similar goals?
Absolutely not, right? I think the one goal that they likely do share is chaos. It's undermining our confidence in our government's ability and democracy in general to provide us the basic services and look out for us. I think that is, again, the top line strategic objective. But in some cases, they may have preferences. They may want one candidate vice the other. But a lot of the times, it is also about targeting audiences back home to show them, hey, look, things aren't that great over there. You're better off here with us as your leaders. And that obviously is not the case, particularly for Russia.
In this instance, it's the Trump campaign saying that they were targeted by Iran. Should we also expect similar actions taken against the Harris campaign or the Biden campaign previously?
I think absolutely. I think what we're seeing right now, it's almost like an iceberg. You just see the part that's the tip that's out of the water. There's a lot more that's going on that either has not been discovered yet or has not been publicly reported yet. I fully expect both the Biden campaign previously and the Harris campaign to have been targeted. And it's likely happening right now, this very moment, continuing to happen, much like the Trump campaign will continue to be targeted. And that will continue going forward. And that will also be from any manner of threat actor, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, even North Korea and others.
We know what happened back in 2016 when the Clinton campaign was targeted by Russia. Those leaks were extremely damaging and ultimately, you could argue, were a major factor in the outcome of that election. How do we navigate this imperative of making sure that the public is adequately informed without elevating the works of a bad actor?
Yeah, well, I think this does speak to journalistic ethics and responsibility of platforms that receive this information, outlets that receive the information, and using good judgment on whether it's appropriate to release. I think the second aspect is, actually, it's the voters. They need to be attuned to the fact that foreign adversaries, our enemies, are trying to get into our heads. We are the targets here. It's not just the campaigns. It's not the election system itself. It's the American voter. And we have to keep in mind that American voters decide American elections. And we need to take a beat, take a pause, understand that we're the target, and not let them be successful.
How can Americans make sure that the information that they're accessing and consuming, especially online, and especially via social media, is trustworthy?
Yeah, it just goes to that thing of going to credible, authoritative voices. So if you have a question about an election, don't listen to some random person on X or Facebook or whatever. Go to the election official webpage. They have FAQs set up that are primed for just those sorts of inquiries and research. And if something that you see online really resonates with you and kind of gets the lizard brain going, again, pause for a moment, ask why you're being served that information, why you're being targeted, and then feel free to do a little bit of research and to confirm what you're reading.
I also want to ask you about a recent social media post by Donald Trump where he falsely claimed that Kamala Harris was basically inflating her crowd sizes via artificial intelligence. It's one thing when we talk about disinformation from a foreign actor, but when you have this kind of bad information put out by, in this case, the nominee of a major party, what are the implications of that?
Well, I think you have to kind of accept the fact that in elections for decades, if not longer, there have always been overstatements, misrepresentations, and in some cases, flat-out lies. That's just part of the process. That's part of elections in the United States. But I think it's that overarching information ecosystem right now that I talked to that's being targeted, that's being undermined, that's being corrupted by actors outside and in, and the incentive structures, meaning how do they benefit from this? What kind of angst and anger do they get generated? That is in favor of these stories, of these bold-faced lies. So I would expect that we're going to see more of it until the voters hold people accountable for lying to them.
Chris Krebs, thanks so much for your insights.
Thanks so much.
A reset in the race for president? Fresh polling shows the Democratic ticket having an edge in 3 key states. Time now for our Politics Monday duo. That's Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Hello.
Hello.
So, Amy, Vice President Kamala Harris now leads former President Donald Trump in 3 crucial battleground states, according to new surveys by the New York Times and Siena College. That's Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Walk us through the numbers, because this is still, we should say, a competitive race.
This is, and the battleground, those are the 3 battleground states that if Kamala Harris were to win just those 3, and in a single electoral vote in Nebraska, she would get to 270 electoral votes. She could lose all those other states that we talk about in the Sun Belt, like Arizona and Nevada, but still win the Electoral College with those three. I think what you're noticing, and we've talked about this previously about where her success has come, she has consolidated the Democratic base. A lot of folks who were sitting on the sidelines who either were not happy with Biden, or were uninspired by Biden, were thinking about voting for a third-party candidate. They have now consolidated behind Harris's candidacy. Why that matters, of course, is that it's now that the two sides now have both equal interest in the election. Their partisan bases are equally interested, and they're equally enthused. The next question is, well, what about the other people in the race who still haven't checked in? And I think that's where we're going to see two things going on for the next, whatever 80 number of days that we have left. The Trump campaign and the Harris campaign fighting to define Harris will be number one. And the second will be to define what this race is about. If you're Kamala Harris, you want this race to be about turning the page and about Donald Trump's liabilities. If you're Trump, you want to make this a race about the fact that Harris is not a new face. She's actually part of the incumbent party that many voters say they're disappointed in terms of handling some key issues.
And Tam, there are some vulnerabilities that Kamala Harris has, according to this new survey, in that voters prefer Donald Trump on two key issues. That's immigration and the economy. We should say that Harris's economic policy is expected to roll out this week. So what more should we be looking for?
Right. And Democrats broadly, so any Democrat, a generic Democrat, a ham sandwich Democrat, would probably have the same issue with the economy and immigration. Voters have just for a long time felt that Republicans are stronger on the economy and on immigration. In terms of the economy, Harris, in her stump speech, has been alluding to where she is likely going with her policy rollout. And we don't exactly know what that's going to entail in terms of the rollout. But she talks about, yeah, prices are too high, and I'm going to bring those prices down. The way she talks about bringing prices down is by going after corporations, by junk fees, and some of the things, many of the things that, in fact, President Biden has been talking about. But she talks about it in a way that is sort of leans more strongly on the, I know it's rough out there. So I think that we're going to see that. When she was in Nevada, she announced that she supports something that former President Trump announced a couple of months ago, which is the idea of not taxing tipped wages for service workers. Now, she is specific that it's for service workers. Some of the criticism of Trump's proposal had been that it also, lawyers and hedge fund people could change their income to be tips instead of wages. In terms of Harris and this proposal, none of it's really fleshed out. There's still no policy section on her website. There was one on the Biden presidential campaign website. But again, it's like 3 weeks in, and they are headed towards the convention. And partially, she is in a race to just keep this momentum, these good vibes, these very excited Democrats, just keep that going as long as she can.
And Amy, if Vice President Kamala Harris is now sort of shifting her focus toward policy, over the weekend, Donald Trump was still focused on crowd sizes. He is famously obsessed with this issue of crowd sizes. And there was this, I guess we should call it a brazenly false claim, I guess there are degrees of false claims now, about Kamala Harris's crowd size in Detroit. He's suggesting that she used artificial intelligence to make the crowds appear larger. He's saying that, in fact, the crowd did not exist. You were there.
I was there. It definitely existed. And at the second she walked off of Air Force Two, the crowd went absolutely wild. And you know what it reminds me of? Trump rallies. Yeah. Trump rallies from an earlier era when he would roll into an airport, buzz over the airport, and just have incredible excitement when he got off the plane.
But him saying something like this, doesn't it create an opportunity for Democrats to make this race more of a referendum on Donald Trump, whereas before it was a referendum to a certain degree on Joe Biden, his age, his fitness, all of that? Because you have critics of Donald Trump who are saying he's now not just dishonest, he's delusional.
Yeah, well, listen, we were all at the RNC together, And we were told by many in the at the convention that this was a different Donald Trump, that this was a more disciplined Donald Trump, that even the attempt on his life had altered the way he sees the world and how he's going to operate. Obviously, that is not the case. It is the same Donald Trump. When he feels like he is losing, when he feels things are out of his control, that's when you see the lashing out. That's when you see these sort of comments on social media. So it is really not surprising to watch that happen. The other thing that's happening that I think is really frustrating both to Trump and to the campaign is Kamala Harris is getting a benefit of the doubt. Even though she is part of the incumbent party, people see her as different because, let's face it, she is different. She's not an older white guy, right? So she just walks out on the stage. That's a turning the page from what this election looked like just a month ago. And I think that is also frustrating to them because they can no longer be the outsider change candidate. She's the incumbent being able to be change at the same time. Now, look, we still have 80 plus days. You're seeing the advertising starting to roll out. It is more disciplined than Trump is. But you're right. If Trump doesn't stay on message, and we're going to find out soon enough, we have a debate on September 10th to see how that works out. But he makes it more about himself. That definitely helps her.
And Tam, the Harris campaign, their tactics are different. As evidence of that, they posted a social media message on Donald Trump's own social media site, Truth Social, basically trolling him because of his obsession about crowd sizes. This is not something that we've seen, at least in this way, with Democrats going on offense like this.
It is somehow more on brand for the younger Harris to have the very same staff be much more actively into trolling than they were when Biden was the nominee. And they are absolutely trolling Trump. And the thing about crowd size is he has always measured himself by the size of his crowds. Yeah. And he's always been able to tell himself that he was winning based on the size of his crowds because his crowds were always bigger. During the Clinton campaign, there was never this level of excitement for a Democrat, for Hillary Clinton. There was never this level of excitement for Joe Biden during COVID. And so Trump is used to running a campaign where he has the biggest crowds and he can look at those crowds and say, I am winning. I can see it in front of my eyes. And now there is someone else who is generating crowds just as big or bigger. And that is a really tough adjustment that is coming at the same time as the poll movement. Now, we should also note, though, that the poll movement is not dramatic. Like, this is still an incredibly close race. An incredibly close race that will be decided in a very small number of states by a very small number of people.
Yeah, and when Harris was announced as the candidate, there were a lot of Democrats who said, look, I don't know how this is going to work out. The one thing I know she can do better than Joe Biden is to get underneath Trump's skin, and that has obviously worked out.
And the campaign has sought to make him smaller. You could argue that
Yes.
Joe Biden, by talking about Donald Trump as an existential threat, in many ways sort of elevated him and made him a bigger figure. The Harris-Walz campaign is saying that he's weird, they're laughing at him, they're trolling him on his own social media site. I mean, what are the implications of that?
Well,
from a
it is
political
to keep him off talking about these things rather than making the case that, look, Kamala Harris is not change. She is more of the same. It is 4 more years of, his argument would be 4 more years of a bad economy, 4 more years of open borders. Instead, when you're debating about crowd sizes and who's weird and who's not weird, well, then that for your average voter, they just go back to their image that they have of Donald Trump, and that is problematic for the Trump campaign.
We'll see you both in Chicago next week at the Democratic National Convention.
Absolutely.
Amy
Yes.
Walter and Tamara Keith, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
$70 million Americans receive Social Security benefits today, but the program is paying out more than it's taking in. Economics correspondent Paul Solman looks at that worrying financial gap and what can be done about it.
And 39.
Social Security, the program most seniors rely on to support them in old age. But as you've heard, it's running out of money. As our paychecks make clear, Social Security takes money from us workers today, the payroll tax, to pay recipients, yesterday's workers once they're at least 62. More workers than recipients, the money accumulates in a trust fund. But fewer workers, more recipients, and the fund gradually drains, as is happening now.
In the early 2030s, the Social Security Trust Fund on the retirement side is going to exhaust its reserves.
That's Social Security expert Alicia Minnell.
Money is going to keep coming in from the payroll tax, but if nothing is done, benefits will be cut, and no one wants that.
Well, as Social Security recipients, my wife and I sure don't. Neither do the 70 million plus baby boomers born in our wake. Nor do you, I assume. Do you think the money is going to run out?
I kind of have an inkling that it might.
Do you think the money's going to be there? All these headlines about Social Security running out of money.
I hope so. It comes out of my check every week, so I hope it does.
Do you think the money's going to be there?
God, I hope so. I would say no.
There's plenty of reason for concern, says the lead author of the Social Security guidebook I helped write years ago, Get What's Yours.
The system is completely bankrupt, and whatever fix they come up with is going to be a much bigger burden on our kids and grandchildren.
Economist Larry Kotlikoff wrote The Coming Generational Storm back in 2004, has been sounding his alarm ever since.
The way we're going is either catastrophically cutting benefits or catastrophically raising taxes. So we're always doing too little too late. We're relying on future generations to be large in number and very productive in order to pay older people. So we're allowing each generation of old people to go and expropriate their kids and then tell the kids, don't worry, when you're old, you'll get your chance to expropriate your kids.
Even if nothing is done, beneficiaries will still get 79%, almost 80% of the amount of money they're getting now, right?
A lot of older people are surviving just on Social Security, so cutting their living standard by 20% is just not acceptable.
So will Social Security beneficiaries actually take a big hit in just a few years?
I would say I'm not worried at all, because no congressman or congresswoman could go back to his or her district if that happened.
The Democrats have long promised no cuts, and the Republican campaign now claims the same.
In the Republican platform, all in capital letters, is a commitment not to take a penny out of Social Security or Medicare.
But former President Donald Trump has now also said,
seniors should not pay taxes on Social Security.
But that would actually deplete the Social Security Trust Fund sooner and mainly benefit the wealthiest recipients. On the other hand, there are fixes. One example:
if they increase the payroll tax by 2% on the employee and 2% on the employer, that would solve the problem for 75 years.
So right now it's 6.2% that I as the employee pay and 6.2% that my employer pays, right?
Right.
And so this would be
8.2 and 8.2.
So that would solve the problem by itself.
That would solve the problem for 75 years. We're still in a point on the cost side where costs are rising because the ratio of beneficiaries to workers is rising. But we're getting closer to the point where that's going to level off. Once that's leveled off, you'll be in a position where if we fix it for 75 years, it's fixed forever.
A second fix:
increase the taxable wage base.
You see, there's a cap on how much of a worker's earnings are taxed for Social Security. This year, $168,600. It rises each year with the average wage, but the cap used to cover 90% of all earnings. Now, with rising inequality and ever more income at the top, it only covers 80%.
And there are a lot of people who say, just take the cap off, make the rich pay. I come down on just raising it to the old 90% target and moving along.
That would hike this year's cap to about $300,000 and cover about 20% of the shortfall. If the cap were removed entirely, it would cover something like 70% of the shortfall. So why not just remove the cap?
If you take it off and don't give people any benefits in return, it really breaks that link between contributions and benefits, which I think could endanger the popularity of the program.
Okay, here's a third fix.
Invest some of the trust fund in equities.
In stocks?
In stocks.
Why is that a good idea?
Over the long run, stocks have earned higher returns than bonds, which is what is in the trust fund now. They also are a higher risk, so you have to be careful when you're talking about this. That doesn't sound like magic money.
Still, over time, investing some in stocks would probably help. Now, a fourth fix was one last enacted in 1983, the last time Social Security was reformed.
Raise the retirement age. Life expectancy is going up. It only makes sense to have people wait till they get their benefits.
But not everyone can wait, even though you get 43% more at age 70 than at 65. Why not wait till 70, where you get more money?
Well, when you're working a blue-collar job, sometimes waiting till 70 in your job is a little too late.
Because it's too hard on your body.
A lot of wear and tear.
Manel has a tweak to account for folks like this.
I think you want to do something that just raises the age at which you get full benefits for those who can work longer. And those people are people in the top half of the income distribution.
So why haven't politicians done anything? On this, Manel and Kotlikov couldn't agree more.
Nobody wants to raise taxes or cut benefits.
It's political dynamite. It's the third rail of politics. Congress is more concerned about the next election than the next generation.
Meanwhile, waiting exacts its price.
Some options do disappear.
Investing funds in the stock market, for example.
A prerequisite for that option is a trust fund. And so as that trust fund goes to zero, that one sort of goes off the table.
I asked my 20-year-old grandson, Joe, what he makes of all this. So as you know, your grandmother and I get substantial Social Security benefits.
Sure.
Do you think you'll get those kinds of benefits when you're my age?
No, I don't think so. I would say that I would hope, at least for me personally, that my income will be coming more so from the investments that I've made, the network that I've made. I'm not planning to rely so much on Social Security.
Joe says he's typical of the younger generations Kotlikov worries so loudly about.
We have a lot of doubt and uncertainty, especially about the U.S. government, at least the circles that I'm in. And so it's hard to have confidence in any current system.
Okay, final verdict. Will Social Security continue to be there or not?
Something will be done, but it will be too little, too late, and it will impose even bigger burdens on our kids, and the system will still not be fixed for the long term.
We've been talking to Manel for years about this. Procrastination is the long-running theme.
We are so bad at fixing this problem. This problem has been so evident since 1990, and so we're in 2024, and I don't think we're really going to move on this until 2030. And so a 40-year lag between the time the problem is identified and the time it's fixed is a little long for my taste.
A little long. But not Social Security doomsday, and we may well be facing bigger problems by decade's end. For the PBS NewsHour, Paul Salman in Boston.
Wisconsin is holding congressional and state primary elections this Tuesday. They're seen by some as a critical dry run for November, when the battleground state will play a crucial role in deciding the next president. And as William Brangham reports, election officials have been increasingly transparent about the mechanics of voting to help boost confidence.
In McFarland, Wisconsin, a small village just outside the state capital, Madison, they're stress testing the tools of democracy. Deputy Administrator Clerk Cassandra Settinger is checking their 4 ballot counting machines.
We put them right side up, we put them backwards, we put them upside down, proving to people that you can put the ballots in any way, shape, or form, and it will still read the results it's supposed to.
The state requires this test within the 10 days before every election to ensure the systems are running correctly and counting ballots accurately. Officials scan pre-marked ballots through the tabulators and compare the machine count to the expected result. A perfect count is required before any machine can be used on Election Day. In her 8 years as clerk, Settinger says she has never had one problem with the machines. After the test, the counts are reset to 0, the tabulators are sealed, and they're locked in a secure room.
Our election storage room was an old evidence room, so there's 4 cameras in each of the corners.
State law and the Wisconsin Elections Commission also require these tests to be open to the public so citizens can understand the security protocols that are in place. Settinger says she's alarmed by the threats made towards election workers in recent years, but hopes this transparency will increase trust in the system.
There is nothing to hide. The public has the ability to watch all parts of the process. The statutes outline in the various parts of our process the ability for observers. And I think that's really important. It's really important for people to know that there's transparency and they can watch any of the various processes and nothing is done in secret. We're here to do our job. We're here to uphold democracy, or we're here to carry out the laws.
Elections in Wisconsin are decentralized, run by more than 1,800 different clerks in their local jurisdictions, which cuts the chance for any widespread fraud. But that hasn't stopped a plague of accusations and misinformation. After the 2020 presidential election, where Joe Biden won Wisconsin by roughly 21,000 votes, Republicans in the state claimed the process was rigged and launched a slew of recounts, audits, investigations, and lawsuits. The Republican-controlled legislature last year also tried unsuccessfully to oust the administrator of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. But each of the post-election reviews found that the 2020 results were fair and accurate. This cycle in Verona, Wisconsin, during early voting in Tuesday's state and local primary, a steady stream of the city's 9,500 registered voters used ballot drop boxes. Those were approved by the state Supreme Court last month.
They are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They do have security cameras on them, and they're very secure.
Inside City Hall, Clerk Holly Licht and her team conducted their state-mandated tests of the city's 8 vote tabulators. They prepared a stack of test ballots that are designed to pressure the machines.
We purposely make some mistakes on the ballots, like overvoting or cross-voting, so that we know that the machine is working correctly.
The real test, of course, comes on Election Day, but Licht is confident the results will once again be accurate. After Tuesday's primary, the work starts almost immediately to prepare for November's presidential election.
This is a good practice round for us. We're hopping right back into another election, and we're preparing ballots and training and everything for November. So there's not a lot of time off here.
Wisconsin clerks will start sending absentee ballots for the presidential election next month. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
Scrimshaw is a traditional 19th century art form now seen through a much wider context and a contemporary lens. That's the goal of an exhibit which challenges some old assumptions about the process and the product itself. Jeffrey Brown went to the New Bedford Whaling Museum in Massachusetts to look for our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
It's a story of contact, impact, connections, great adventure and great loss. Humans and animals across 2 oceans over some 100 years. In the exhibition titled The Wider World in Scrimshaw, the story is told through objects. Chief Curator Naomi Slip.
They're records of individual experiences and what those individuals were doing, whether they were in communities that were regular ports of call for whalers or whether they were whalers on shipboard themselves. They were having these extraordinary experiences.
The romance of sea adventures, the fascination with whales themselves. It's part of the experience here. Visitors are greeted by an 8,000-pound juvenile blue whale skeleton. But in a gallery next door, a special exhibit offers a different kind of window. Scrimshaw is the traditional art form of carving or engraving on the bones, teeth, and ivory of marine mammals, typically whales and walruses. It's most associated with 19th century whaling, an industry long centered, think Herman Melville and Moby Dick, here in New Bedford. The Whaling Museum, in what's still a port city with a working harbor, houses the world's largest scrimshaw collection.
So if you come and look very carefully at that.
But for this exhibition, it wanted to set those objects in a larger context or conversation, among a wide range of works by the indigenous peoples with whom whalers came into regular contact throughout the Pacific.
This is a busk that's
Slip points to this small busk. Busks were a regular part of women's fashion in the 19th century, used to stiffen corsets and typically made from whalebone. But this one had an unusual pattern engraved into it.
And we looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, it's a navigation chart. It's a navigation chart that's used traditionally in parts of the Pacific to learn the patterns of swells and currents to move from island to island.
So not by the Yankee whalers, but by the people they were connecting with.
Exactly, with Pacific Islanders. And so the idea that someone who was on a whaling vessel who was creating a busk, which is a very New England form for a corset, was also inscribing it with something that would have been really culturally significant for Pacific Islanders was quite tantalizing.
Scholars have long studied this collision of cultures, as well as the often negative political, environmental, and other consequences. This exhibition, Slip says, tries to tie into the research and make artistic connections to today.
It's been spoken as a lost art form, but I like to think of it as it's been sleeping, and my practice has wakened it up.
Artist Cora Allen Lafaiki Twist from New Zealand is part Maori, part Nui, the latter a small island some 1,500 miles to the northeast. 8 years ago, she took up the traditional art of making tapa bark cloth paintings, called hiapo in Nui, where she says the practice is all but gone. It's been rare for her to even see older hiapo, she says, and then she got an email with a photo from the New Bedford Whaling Museum, which owned this well-preserved work brought back on a Yankee whaler.
I was also confused because I'm like, what is this doing in New Bedford? What's it doing so far away from home? And it's in good condition, and the ink itself is absolutely bright and vibrant like the day it would have been made. And then there's, of course, a ship inside one of the patterns, and so that also talks about that colonial history that Niue have and really placing this in that time period.
The museum commissioned her to create a new work, a kind of conversation with the old, with her own imagery and patterns of the sea and its animal life. Cora Allen believes she's the first practitioner in more than 100 years and says it was her grandparents who first asked her to take it up. Why was it important for you to take on?
It's important to me because I was asked.
By them?
I was asked by them. They asked me, and they worked 6 days a week. My nana worked up till she was like 70. Why wouldn't I take on the responsibility being asked? Because it's so important that my culture is shared, but they weren't able to continue these practices, and so it's important because they asked me, and I'm a granddaughter from the Moana, from the Pacific.
Another contemporary artist updating and bringing urgency to the 19th century story, Courtney M. Leonard of the Shinnecock Indian Nation, based on eastern Long Island, New York. Her work at the museum, part of an ongoing project she titled Breach, looks at past undertold stories, including members of her tribe who sailed on whaling ships. Her scrimshaw studies, as she calls them, are made of ceramic, and the breach she addresses is moral, legal ownership of the land, and environmental, including today, sea rise.
You grow up with the water and you understand your relationship to place and your responsibility to place. Whether one chooses to have that be their life's work is up to them, but for some, at least for myself living back home, we do have rising waters. So when you're living in a place where the waters rise, you realize that time is of value in many different ways.
As the exhibition shows, today marine mammals such as whales and walruses have legal protections, and the trade in whale and walrus bone and ivory, including scrimshaw, is heavily regulated. Still, it can be unsettling to experience these objects made of the bones and teeth of some of the Earth's most magnificent creatures. I asked Chief Curator Naomi Slip how she sees it.
It's a hard thing. I mean, I think if you really think about what we're surrounded by in here, There's an intense amount of death, which is sort of sometimes overwhelming if you really sit with it. The number of whales and walrus and other species that are represented by these materials. But I hope that ultimately what people come away with is a sense of kind of survival and survivance, of tradition and of craft and of communities, of the whales themselves.
The Wider World in Scrimshaw is on through November 11th. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown at the New Bedford Whaling Museum in Massachusetts.
And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us. Have a good night.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.